Austin Tech Connect is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Founded in 1992, ATC exists to help unite the local technology ecosystem and to encourage the spread of community, collaboration, and conversations in Central Texas. This podcast is sponsored by SailPoint. They are a leading provider of identity security for the modern enterprise, empowering organizations worldwide to put identity security at the core of their business. With a foundation of artificial intelligence and machine learning, SailPoint Identity Security delivers the right access to the right identities and resources at the right time. Now, here is this week's episode.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council, and it is the podcast that looks at the future of our technology community in Central Texas. Every single week, we bring to the show local leaders to hear their stories of success and to get their advice on how we can all thrive going into the future. And today, I am excited because we have Clint Davis with us. Clint is the CEO and founder of the Capsll app, and we're going to learn all about that in a few minutes. Hey, Clint, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom. So good to see you again. And really excited for this. We've kind of switched ends now. I think the last time we did a podcast together, I was asking you the questions.
Yeah, I think like 3 or 4 years ago, you interviewed me on a different show. And so now I get to turn those corners. And I reconnected with Clint very recently, talking about the Austin Technology Council and all the things we're trying to do to bring this community together. And him being the CEO of a growing technology-focused app, he's the perfect person to get his ideas about where we're going in the future. For those of you who don't know Clint, though, he encourages people all around him to really find their own vision. He's always in your corner, and he shares insights, and he supports people. He pushes them to share the parts of their stories that matter, and he helps them focus on that future. And that's what he does in his personal life and with Capsll. Clint is a former radio host, and he believes with Capsll that people should save their memories, share their memories for deeper connections, and be able to pass them forward generationally so that your future generations will remember who you are and what you did so well. So Clint, let's jump into this. So before Capsll app, what's your background? I said that you were a former radio host. Where did you start off in the world of business?
Yeah, I mean, as you can tell, Tom, it's the old standing joke on my part that the deep Southern Texan accent is clearly coming over. So shout out to all the deep Southern Texanites out there. Mine's a little more south. Started my journey in South Africa. Grew up under the apartheid system. My wife and I ended up leaving there in 2008 to explore the world and explore a few different opportunities and different cultures as such. And we ended up living in Dubai for 6 years, Australia for 2, Los Angeles for a year and a half. Have a very different kind of immigrant story in that we won the green card lottery at a 0.73% chance. So when you tell me something's not possible, I beg to differ. And after LA, ended up in Austin, Texas, which is our home, has been for some time now. And, we're just really excited. It's amazing how the time has lined up for technology in our city. I was involved in tech in this way when we moved to the city. We've been founding for just over 3 years now. And it's incredible to see how that tapestry has panned out. So 17 years in radio broadcasting, did that in each of those countries that I lived in. Sounds glamorous. It wasn't. Had to reinvent myself each time. And we moved on a zero budget each of those times. Didn't arrive on the yacht. And a few other dynamic things. I was a high performance driving instructor on racetracks for many, many years, around 15 years. Hold a degree in theology. And I guess that leads to some of the anthropological view that I have on how humans should be saving our history and recognizing our memories as such value propositions to our current lives and moving forward. And that's really where I commit my time now, to helping save the world's memories.
So it's interesting because you said you really weren't involved in sort of this tech startup scene before a few years ago, after getting to Austin. Do you think there's sort of an osmosis? I mean, we're such a tech-focused town. We're such a startup-focused town. Do you feel that when people come here, even if they don't come for tech, they get lured in by our technology community?
Yeah, I think it works both ways. I think some people get lured in. I think some people get repulsed. It can do that. I don't know. I was helping out with a radio-based app at one point from Austin when I was living here. I was also helping some CEOs with their podcasts and such. But I definitely said that I never want to create an app. I saw how difficult it was and all the bugs and all the difficulty that come with it. And lo and behold, it still did turn out to be the best way to have something in somebody's hands for immediate activation. So I think, Austin, as far as drawing people into tech, I think there's great opportunity, great rhetoric around it being a place. For us, it certainly was a place to take a stand. And there's the old adage that as America goes, so the world goes. I don't know if it's entirely true anymore, but certainly as Texas goes, the country goes. As Austin goes, Texas goes. We've all heard that sort of thing. So by happenstance, we ended up being in the right spot for this. Does it particularly is it already an ecosystem that attracts people specifically for tech? I think certain companies have done that. I think we got some work to do to make it a realistic foundation.
Nice. So what inspired you to start Capsll? Let's talk a little bit about the company, where you are now, and what you're trying to do. Where did the inspiration? Where did that nugget of I'm not going to do an app. I'm not going to do an app. I'm starting an app.
I know, it's crazy. Actually, it was 9:30 at night, and having lived this life of radio and all of these things, you get afforded a lot of opportunities to do cool stuff that would normally cost you a lot of money, or you wouldn't be able to do because you wouldn't have access. I've always wanted to save those, but it came apparent to me that what I really wanted to save was the story behind the story. Why are my wife and I the people we are now? How did we get the character? How do we operate in certain levels of wisdom or insight? And that's really comes down to the tough times more often than not, the struggle more often than not. And I don't want to put that on a public forum. I want to leave that to my kids one day when I have them, or to other valuable loved ones who will listen. And sitting in this office, frustrated after just having recorded a private podcast to try and save these things, I suddenly realized I'm also plagued by the idea that I do not have my grandfather's insights, who was an orphan who became a very influential CEO in South Africa in his day, but passed many years ago. And I started thinking, as a CEO myself now, how would I love to have that perspective, but it's gone. So I wandered downstairs. My wife was still at work, 9:30 at night. I'm washing dishes like a good husband should. And I start getting what I think is, it's hard for me to put this on a grid. If this is not your grid, then perhaps you can just share it with me for a moment. But I think a divine download of sorts in terms of the necessity to save humanity's memories. Now, since then, there's been a lot of mental health, a lot of books and things that have come out that have highlighted the need to do this and the importance on our own value proposition and our mental health, all the way down to a neurological level in looking back on our memories. And it's certainly something we've done as a species throughout history, yet we don't do it in this age. So what started out as wanting to build a very simple website for people to go and engage and save their memories for themselves turned out to the fact that it had to be in people's hands, and hence had to bite the bullet and go the app route.
So it's interesting. You talk about, like, throughout history, recording what happened. And then historians going back and uncovering these things has been really important. I just got back from almost 2-week vacation over Christmas and New Year's to Egypt. And going into these 5,000, 3,000-year-old tombs and seeing the hieroglyphics and being with an Egyptologist who was our guide, who was able to read what was going on and telling the story of why they wrote things down, that the way they wrote them down in these different tombs and things like that, it really was done for a reason. This wasn't just written down for no reason. It was written down for the generations and to tell the story. And we've certainly learned a lot from being able to do that. So as we look to our individual stories, I mean, we're not pharaohs, we're just people living in Austin. Why are my individual stories important to my descendants?
Yeah, I think it's right. It's so fascinating how we have separated ourselves from our pasts as a species, particularly in the Western world. It's almost like we can, and I'm not saying you did this, but we can look at historical artifact and feel that removal from it. It's nice to look at, nice to honor how they did that in their time, and yet not even a single thought goes to what I'm leaving behind in terms of my insight and my wisdom. The real kicker on this whole thing is that there's 8 billion people on the planet, and absolutely impossible that two people have exactly the same life journey. It's just not possible to have the same experiences with the same responses throughout that life journey, never mind neurologically, physiologically, and such. So we're all completely unique, which means your story is completely unique to you. Your insights, your wisdom are completely unique to you. When we think about generational pass down of that insight, of that wisdom, there's a uniqueness that lies in your family line as well. There's a certain way your family does things, a certain way that you've reached certain accomplishments or had certain failures or successes. And there's something inherent about our stories that relate on a deeper level when they're passed down by family. So part of it, I think, goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of wanting to be known, and being known beyond just your own lifetime has always been something that's fascinated us. I mean, that's the one side on a personal level. On the other level, though, as a collective, we look at cave drawings, hieroglyphics and such, all the way through to, boxes of photos, to family albums and such. We've always had this inherent thing of passing our history, and that can sometimes be for warning, sometimes for a road forward. And, I kind of think if we gave value to our past, we might be sitting in a slightly better world today, certainly focused on creating a better one for the future.
So, you talked about the fact that, having a way to pass these down that's not on a public forum. As I traveled Egypt every day, I put some pictures up and wrote about what we did each day of the trip on Facebook. And, I kind of thought I was being cocky, like, look at me. But my friends loved it. They loved the experience of seeing the different, and, we took a 4-day Nile cruise. It was very different every day. But that's a public forum. And we all know, and we've seen this in social media. I mean, just because Facebook's been around as long as it have, some of these social media sites have vanished over the years. And, so poof, that's gone. But what's the biggest difference between what you're trying to accomplish with Capsll and some of these things like Instagram and Facebook and other places where we could tell our stories?
Yeah, if you download the Capsll app, you'll first, sort of understand and probably see that it's another social media network, another social media play. And it really isn't that. It's kind of been tricky for us as a company because we're creating a new vertical, and that vertical is digital legacy. We pass down our estates, in terms of finance and, physical properties and such, but we don't pass down our insights and wisdom so well. So this factor of digital legacy, the fact that we sit in a time of history right now where we can actually do this, is really profound if you just sit and think about it for a moment, that we have an opportunity as a generation to change the way we value our stories and our history. But when we look at social media as such, we're just coming to the inflection point now where we have enough data from the last 10 to 15 years of Facebook, of Instagram and such, to see how it's impacted humanity, not only in our interactions with each other. And I think we all have strong opinions on that. Mine is that something that was supposed to connect us didn't live up to what it promised and has divided us. Some might say that's just revealed the inherent human nature. But either way, the case exists for privacy around that space, certainly when it comes to your meaningful memories. When we look at social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook and such, we can look at them from different angles. Have they created a space for us to upload content and learn about content? Yes, they have. Have they created safe environments? In my opinion, no, they haven't. It's not really part of their focus. Have they created a space to save our history and pass it on? No, they haven't, because ownership doesn't stay with the user. And let's be frank, it's just not their business model. Their business model is to generate movement around current content for ad revenue. And that is the business model. When you're building something and bearing the responsibility and the ethic of meaningful memories stored forever, you have to approach that a little bit differently. You have to bear that responsibility. And I think you have to have gone through a certain amount in life, and I speak for my team as well, to be able to bear that responsibility and take it seriously. It's not easy to get all of those factors across in a new vertical, but you have to accept the challenge that things that change the world aren't always easy.
So it's interesting because, you talk about the fact that, something that was supposed to bring us together has maybe divided us. I mean, for 15 or 20 years, we've talked about, connectivity between digital and mobile and social media, et cetera. And I find in trying to build and rebuild a community around the Austin Technology Council, it's harder to get people to come together. People are getting very comfortable being in their silos. People are very happy just having their little circle. People are very happy, not connecting with people who don't share their job title or share their level of investment or whatever it is. And, I find it very interesting because I think it's harder now to build community than maybe it was 20 or 30 years ago. So how do memories help us build community, both within a family, within a community, and within a company? I mean, I see part of your play as a great thing for entrepreneurs to be able to pass their story down within their company. So I see sort of a B2B play in what you're doing as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, underlying what we've built as an app is the company, Capsll, which is a memory company. And we'll have many applications that flow through us as a company. One of them will be a B2B play, because I do think it's important for brands to be able to save their story of that brand, to pass it down. How else would you secure longevity of culture, particularly nowadays when you've got people who move from job to job within an 18-month, 2-year period, right? So you're having to do this all the time. So I think the approach really, when it comes to B2B, is that whether you are rolling out application towards memory on a collective level or an individual level, it always comes back to the individual. It always does, because it's your story. If you are part of a story, it means something to you. If you're able to share a personal story with somebody, it will connect you on a deeper level. And I think the same goes on a different level, maybe not as deep and personal, as intimate as your personal story shared with your family, but certainly when you share a story with a team member, you're going to feel more connected. When you share a story as a brand, how the original family maybe started that brand and what the original intent was, you're going to feel a deeper connection to that. You know, when you ever sit with somebody that works for a particular company and you go, well, this is my perspective on that, and they tell you, well, actually on their onboarding, this is how it started and this is the wholesomeness of it. It can change your idea around it. So ideas are powerful. Memory is even more powerful. Ideas tend to lead us towards looking forward, whereas memories help us equate the past. And in that past, we find lessons, we find learnings, we find character, we find success and failures, but we find the shaping that gives us the encouragement to move forward. And that can happen to us individually, collectively as friends or family, or as a brand.
So shifting gears a little bit, one of the things in your bio was that you were a high-performance driving instructor around the world.
Oh, yeah.
As a high-performance driving instructor, where are the parallels to being a CEO of a startup? Where are the parallels for that? What do you pull from as a high-performance driving instructor that you use as you're growing this company?
Yeah, other than the fact that as in both fields, you feel like you're about to have a major wreck. You know, it's like every day is kind of the same, to be honest. They both move at the speed of light, and they both feel like you're on the seat of your pants yelling at the customer in the driver's seat to hit the brakes before we head into this turn, you know. So I think, if anything, it comes down to communication. And, you know, if you look at my background, it's always been communication. It's radio, it's on racetracks. You know, the best instructors on racetracks are not the ones that are the best drivers, because you're in the passenger seat most of the time. The best instructors are the best communicators. And isn't that true of business? Isn't it true when you're trying to get something across about what you're bringing to the world, a vision, a value? Isn't it true when you're trying to build culture in your teams? Isn't it communication? Now, isn't our communication going to be much richer if we take a moment to value previous communications, previous outcomes, previous stories that have come before us? And so these two tie together quite naturally for me. Communication from the past drives our connection currently and motivates our communication and our connection moving forward.
We're going to take a quick second to thank the sponsor of this episode. Our sponsor is Insperity. At Insperity, it's not just HR outsourcing. It's HR that makes a difference. Their comprehensive, scalable HR solutions offer an optimal blend of service and technology to facilitate growth. They provide the tools to help you lighten your administrative load, maximize productivity, and manage risks so that you can focus on growth, because that's what it means to have a true HR partner. Learn more at insperity.com. So, Clint, you've been in Austin a few years now, and it was interesting when you were telling your story about going from South Africa to Dubai. There was another place, and then Los Angeles, and then here. And then you said Austin, which is our home. And I hear that from so many people. I've had the honor to sit down one-on-one since I took this job with about 200 business leaders, and I've interviewed about 60 people for this podcast. And everybody, most of us are transplants who are here, and so many people say that little piece of, you know, and now Austin is what I call home. Why is Austin home compared to all these different places that you've lived?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a great question of all the places that we have lived. Generally it comes down to the people. It really does. Anywhere that you feel connected enough to call a home, it does have to have the people involvement in it. And I think this city is, it's a very interesting place, isn't it? Such an identity moving towards, say, the last 7 years of keeping Austin weird and kind of small town and that sort of thing. And then this massive boom and lots of challenges to our identity from outside. I think one of the things that made it feel like home for us is that we landed here before that boom. And so we were still just on the back end. And those Austinites who have been here longer will say, nope, you were here.
Yeah, I saw the boom start in 1991 when I moved here.
Yes, absolutely. A total credit to there. So let's say this current boom. I'll just redefine history for us for a moment. But I think that does, and I think then maybe it's not so much about what the city gives to you that makes it home, but what you give to the city and what you want to see grow and how protective you start feeling around some of the rhetorics around it and how protective in particular you start feeling around people that are coming in to perhaps use the city for their own gain, but not necessarily give something back to it. And so it's definitely been something that we've put a lot of focus on in terms of trying to, we want global reach, but you have to have a home. You really do. You have to be able to plant roots somewhere and go from there. And so, it's definitely become quite inherent in our ethos to have a home. And Austin is our home, and we're super grateful for it, and we're excited for what's to come. But I do think that we do have not as much as a crisis, but for lack of a better term, an identity crisis on the horizon in terms of what is Austin really now in the modern age. But when it's your home, you're willing to engage in those conversations. When it's not, you don't.
Well, that's sort of a perfect segue for the next question I want to have. You came here not for tech, and then you've got absorbed into our technology growth ecosystem. What do you think Austin does really well when it comes to being a place to start a company, grow a company, or work for a large company in a tech career? And maybe where are some of the areas that we need to be aware of so that we don't lose our identity and we don't get lost?
Yeah. Honestly, I think probably the biggest thing is probably not what you'd expect, because I'd love to answer primarily with a philosophical or ethical type base. But I think geolocation is just so important. Having lived in a few countries, they're all smaller countries than America. So it's kind of, you're on one time zone. You can kind of work with anybody in the country. Being central is quite important to the clock. Very difficult to cross the bridge from east to west. Well, certainly for me as a founder, right? So I know that others don't have this problem, but for me, not being born in America, now I'm an American citizen, but still learning how such a mass population works. That's certainly one of them. But I think the whole ideal of keeping Austin weird, it goes beyond the weird. Weird is how you define it, really. I think it's more about being able to be outside of the box. I think there are a lot of cities that you have to be in a certain box. You have to act a certain way, dress a certain way in order to be received. I think Austin differentiates very well there. I think you have more opportunity to show up. And this is maybe because of the Keep Austin Weird thing. And maybe it's just because of the time that we're at, that we're in this inflection point of discovering our new identity as a city. But I do think that the freedom to move outside the box and still be respected or still have your voice heard is certainly critical for the type of thing we're trying to do.
So what are some of the areas that we need to watch out for, and maybe Austin needs to pull itself up by its bootstraps to not fall into the hole?
Yeah, you're pressing me now. I know I'm going to make some enemies. There's a two-edged sword. I have a friend who will most likely be, if not the next, one of the next presidents of South Africa. And he is if you speak this language or not, it's frankly irrelevant to me. But in South Africa, we speak black and white and race and things because we're far down the road of democracy. We recognize that speaking about these things has to be quite rugged. And so we do approach it that way. So I have an African friend, a black friend. I'm averse to the African-American term because I am African. But nonetheless, he said it this way. He said, if you want to protect your culture, you don't close it up from the outside world. You share it and allow people to adopt it. And when they adopt it, they will also bring some change to it, but the culture will grow and evolve as it should. With many external large tech companies coming into Austin, we have the same two-edged sword. What is the level to which we protect our desires for moving forward as a particular city, perceived a particular way and accomplishing certain things with a particular responsibility and ethic, hopefully, versus allowing those that are bringing these economic surges into our city, which are necessary to build a city, having them dictate that ethos, that responsibility, that ethic. It's a very fine line because we know the old adage that money talks. But I think as far as technology goes, and certainly with the current advances in tech, particularly AI, we do have to really, really consider what the underlying human value is of everything we build, everything we do. And that goes to identity and perspective and perception as well of us as a city. So caring for those relationships in a healthy way and trying to have a rhetoric that brings people on board in a collective could protect us from it becoming us versus them or just becoming another city from whence they came.
So it's interesting. You talk about sort of, you let your culture be and the people come in and they bring something to it and you bring something to them. It reminds me, my grandfather moved here in 1900 and he passed away when I was a baby, but his stories about him, he loved the image of the United States as a melting pot. He believed, being an Irish American, he believed that his culture became part of America, but America became part of his family. And he was very much, my mother and her siblings were very much this idea of this melting pot. And we don't hear that very much anymore around our country. But when you talk about Austin, in a way, I'd never thought of it this way. When you said that, I thought, my 33 years in Austin, that's really what Austin has been, right? People have come, they've got absorbed. Very few people that I've encountered have come to Austin and hated it and left. Most people, I always say, develop an unnatural love affair with Austin and it becomes their home and they change and Austin changes because of them. So I really liked what you said because it kind of reframed this idea of all these people coming in. Many of us, if you ask an Austinite, when was the best time in Austin? It was the day after they arrived.
Right. And, that's right.
But having been here 32 years and seen all the changes, I think the best days really do lie ahead for Austin and for our tech community. But I think that we can't take it for granted. I think that we can't believe our own press. I think that, if we want to have this thriving, welcoming tech community that's welcoming to the startup, the multinational and everything in between, I think that we need to come together as a community and fight for that.
Yeah, I think, melting pot is such a great term because it is messy as well. One of the great joys of our life was actually when we moved to Dubai, there was an electric energy in the air between 2008, 2010. Now, keep in mind that this is recession time, given that Dubai was ignoring the recession and claiming it wasn't going to touch them. Obviously, that changed a few years after, but certainly for that period. But the beauty of it was that you had all of these cultures, all of these people from around the world. There are 200 nations represented in Dubai. And yet, because they were all expats, they felt this deep understanding to help each other make it. Because if you didn't, you were on your own. And there's nothing worse than being stuck in another country on your own. It is the loneliest thing to do. And I've experienced that here in America when we moved to America. But the amount of opportunity just from people willing to say, oh, I know someone that can help you, or wow, that's a great idea. Okay, let's have a coffee. Or just that formed this physically, it's hard to explain, electric feeling in the air. America as a melting pot in its history, I think, had the same sense. I mean, maybe not to this modernized degree, but certainly when we look at, the spreading out of land over a continent and finding a home and roots and everything, we know there's a lot of ills that came with that, understand that, and we should own those. But at the same time, there's an opportunity ahead of us in this city, being a melting pot, to feel that electricity, to have this move forward. And I agree with you. I think our best years are ahead. I also think that our best years are ahead as a nation, if we can get a few things right. And I think that starts with understanding that, yes, this country was made up from a collective, and there's great power in that collective. We don't need the uniformity that other older nations have developed to this point, because that uniformity is a step later I think we've got to get through this resolve first to be able to find our own identity. I think we have identity crisis as a city to some degree, but we have it as a country as well. Somebody needs to lead the way in forming this melting pot collective where there's mutual honor and respect and help and assistance for each other. And I think we can be that.
Nice. So I ask everybody who comes on the show, because my personal belief is when we have more community, collaboration, and conversations, we can solve all problems. I often think that in Washington, D.C., I wish all of our elected officials had to put on a hat that said community, collaboration, and conversations required. And every time they walked into the Capitol, they had to live by those 3 words. But they haven't asked me for that, so whatever. But
did you email them, Tom?
I should. I'll send something to them today.
I'm sure you'll be heard.
I'm sure they'll answer that email. So when I say those 3 words, though, which one resonates the most with you and why?
Yeah, it's always going to be communication for me. I think, if we look at, I just think it comes first. I think if we look historically, isn't it the thing that came before collaboration? It's sitting around fires, ancient humans having conversations about hunting the mammoth, It's, which then translates to Africa as to how do you eat an elephant, and you shouldn't eat elephants, just for the record, right. Definitely not. But the answer is one bite at a time. So it's always going to be communication. I think, however, hasn't our communication become so rushed? Aren't we so bound? Haven't we bound ourselves so much to time that we devalue communication in the sense of, okay, yeah, got it, moving on. Or, yeah, I can have a lunch with somebody, make a bunch of promises about connecting them, and then never think of them again. It's a value proposition behind it. So just because we're talking doesn't mean we're communicating.
We had lunch recently, and when I got to my car, I sent the invitation or the introduction from Sandy to my friend Leslie, who writes memoirs. While I was sitting in the car before I drove away, I sent that email because otherwise I may not have remembered it. So you're right. So often people don't follow through on those conversations that they had. And you are right that I think that the conversations that we have are more rushed. People try to abbreviate. How few characters can we send in a text? How many emojis can we use to replace words? And I think we have to get back to that, sitting down and having those deep conversations. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think our comfort comes into play as well. It's not always comfortable to help other people, but the reality is that communication through the ages has been bolstered most by discomfort. Right? So you're in a war. Guess what? You need to communicate. When your house is burning down, you need to communicate. When animals are trying to hunt you, you really do need to be communicating. So it's just it's just core to everything we do. I love that you mentioned Sandy. Sandy's our COO at Capsll, and there's a lot of talk about women in tech, and we are so privileged and honored to have her as our COO. In Capsll, as we try to forge new paths in that direction as well to bring equality. But it's more than that as well, because we all know that ladies communicate often, I don't want to say better, but certainly more empathetically. Because I think that you can grow in your communication, male or female, whatever, that's fine. But there's a valued perspective that if we don't have it, we are definitely lacking. So, I think that's super valuable. But like I said, just because we're talking doesn't mean we're communicating. There needs to be an underlying depth. What is the thing that hits you to want to help somebody else in a society that has become so divided and so me-centric?
Well, this has been a great conversation. I've got one more question for you.
Yeah.
So if one of your friends from South Africa was coming to Austin, it's only going to be here a couple days, and you had to take them to one place that would be like, this is Austin, where's the one place you would take them?
Such an easy question. There's so many great places in Austin and more growing every single day. But I have been asked this before, and I am a creature of habit. And so about 3 minutes up the road from where I live is a place called Armadillo Den. And it is a typical, non-typical outdoor Texas venue with a stage, with benches, with fire pits, with a little bar with some food trucks. It is the quintessential Austin venue, I think. But I tell you, the thing that makes it so great is when you walk in, it feels like the old show Cheers.
Everybody knows your name.
Yeah. You walk in, it doesn't matter if you know people or not. It just has a friendly feeling about it. And sometimes you just pick that up. And so, yep, Armadillo Den, you owe me something. This is about the 4th shout out I've given you. Give me a burger.
Well, and I know a lot of things, and I don't know the Armadillo Den, so I'm going to check it out. Hey, Clint, thank you so much for being here on the show. Any final words?
No, I appreciate it, Tom. I appreciate what you guys are doing with the Austin Technology Council. We are so excited to be a part of it. And, there's a real need in our city for this, and we just need more people to realize that. We go through waves of different activations, different coverings, different groups and such. There are not, let me put it this way, there are few that are homegrown and homebred, and shouldn't that be the starting point?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate everybody who tunes in and listens to this podcast week after week. Do me a favor, go tell all your friends, because we're growing, but I want to grow faster, which means if everybody listening today goes and tells 3 people, you got to listen to Austin Tech Connect, we'll be 3 times as big in a week. So that's what I challenge you to do. And make sure that your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council. As we try to regrow this organization as a grassroots organization, we can't do it if the grassroots doesn't show up and lead us. Because as much fun as I'm having, this isn't the Tom Show. It's got to be about the leaders in tech saying, here's who we are, here's where we want to go. So make sure that your company is lending your voice to the Austin Technology Council. You can find out more at austintechnologycouncil.org.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.